first of many interviews on Jewish Link. This is our first interview. I'm here with Rafi Hecht, as he's known. You prefer Raphael or Rafi?
Rafi.
Okay, so we're here talking about the subject of Techeiles or Techelet. How do you prefer to pronounce it?
Either or.
So,
Either or. Yes, it's fine.
or as some people call it, blue fringes, right? So, I joined Rafi's group a couple months ago because I was personally curious about the mitzvah. My Rav, Rabbi Belsky, wore Techeiles, and as we mentioned, kept it kind of hidden. And then I saw the posts about his nephew. I think I called him his son-in-law or something once. And it made me really think about this subject a lot more. It's obviously a mitzvah that's important. It's mentioned in the Torah, what, 8 times, 9 times, 7 times or so?
Well, the term Techeiles is mentioned over 60 times.
How many?
It's mentioned over 60 times. No, sorry, I think 75 times. I have to double check.
75, sorry.
But the word Techeiles, the mitzvah of wearing Techeiles is mentioned in at the end of Shlach.
Okay. For those that don't know, Techeiles is the blue string that you sometimes see that's used to be associated, I guess, with Zionists more than anything else. Now, you know, we're talking about it because it's become more mainstream. So for you, what made you interested in Techeiles? Like why? Oh, so you wear them. I don't. It's been something I've been considering. Every time I buy a new pair of tzitzis, I consider it. You know, spending the extra $15 doesn't seem like that big of a deal. $15, $20.
At the end of the day, a lot of it really comes down to financial expense. But we'll get into that.
Right. I mean, people spend hundreds of dollars on the S-Reg, so spending a couple dollars extra on, you know, a blue dye on your tzitzis shouldn't be that, you know, expense, especially since it is a mitzvah d'oraisa. So what made you interested in becoming knowledgeable about tzitzis? Okay,
thank you. So the truth is, I knew about Techeiles since the mid-90s, when I was about 11, 12 years old. Someone I was friendly with returned from Eretz Yisroel and wore Techeiles. So I asked him what it was, and he told me. And I was like, how? Mashiach hasn't even come yet, right? He explained that a new organization started out and researched it to be a snail. I went back and asked my father why we don't wear it, and he said he would start wearing it when his Rav would wear it, right? Standard answer. I was more pragmatic about it and decided myself that I could start considering to wear it once names I recognized would start wearing it. So I mean the whole thing went to the back of my mind, and then I went on with whatever I was doing. 4 years ago, my family went to Eretz Yisroel for a couple of weeks. One day we hired a front tour guide. We were passing Ma'alei Adumim, and you know, whatever was in the back of my mind came to the front. I piped up, isn't Patel Techeiles around here? So he responded, yes, and I suddenly expressed my intent to get Techeiles. I wasn't 100% certain about it, but I figured I'm rarely in Eretz Yisroel, and I'm in a place where I can easily get it, and it's practically now or never. Just a full disclaimer, my wife is in the background. When I mentioned it, her eyes popped out. She was like, "You've never mentioned this before in your life, and now all of a sudden you want to wear something that's you're going to stick out." So for Breslevers, you know, that was going through her mind. But you know, anyway, that's a whole different story. That said, when I bought a tallis with Techeiles, I didn't put it on right away. I set it aside for over a month and did my own research. My main question was what the Gedolim had to say about it. At the time, the list you see today wasn't as obvious back then, right? Right. You heard a lot of different names. I mean, you had Rabbi Bar Chaim, you had Rabbi Herschel Schachter. You had a lot of religious Zionist names. You didn't have like the Uber Haredi names that were.
Yeah, the Dati seem to have embraced it, obviously, because you know the blue represents Israel. For those, you know, for a lot of people, having the blue tzitzis it's a connection to Israel. I mean, it's a mitzvah that existed at one point. And some people believe the mesorah is lost, and at one point Jews just stopped doing it. And I think it's always thought it was interesting because it is a mitzvah that is very inherent with Eretz Yisroel. And
it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that, just as an aside, because the whole flag of Israel that we have today is partially inspired by the tzitzis we wear, and the blue stripes that some Jews wear today on their tzitzis are zecher for Techeiles. So
right.
it's kind of the other way around. The modern state got its flag inspiration from Techeiles as opposed to the other way around.
Right.
So it's just a very very interesting relationship in that respect. But at any rate, so at the time the list you see today wasn't as obvious back then. There were a few videos on Techeiles' YouTube channel from Rabbi Hershel Schachter, Rabbi Betzion Twersky, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky, Zepsadik Levracha, Rabbi Betzion Halberstam Shlita, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, and a few others. Most of these names were names I recognized, so I felt more comfortable about it. Rabbi Weinreb in particular was an interesting one because I actually met him a few years prior when interning at the OU back in 2004, 2005. And I so happened to have saved his email address. So I started by asking him what his thoughts on the matter were, and as well as the aspect of kibbud av va'em on this matter was in terms of quote unquote looking firmer, right? His response was that, quote unquote, and I'm quoting this directly from the email he sent me. I can't tell you what to do, but there are numerous rabbanim from all sectors who do wear it. Go on to techeiles.com for more information, but with all due respect to your father, I don't think that it is a lack of kibbud av for you to wear techeiles, even if he does not. So after I started taking it on, I emailed him thanking him, and his response was, may you keep doing all sorts of mitzvahs. So that kind of kickstarted it for me.
Yeah, it's such a unique mitzvah. The reason I've thought about it is partially my connection to Israel, and partially because of my Rebbe wore it. But also I have to be honest. You have been an inspiration for me as you inform the general public and your website. I go to your website all the time to cut and paste when I talk to people about it, because for me it's something I want to learn. I really want to get into it and understand it before I put it on my tallis. And I think that's like a lot of people. If we're going to do it on the tallis gadol, or going to do it on your the katan.
It's an organic thing.
Yeah, you need to have a connection to it. So I feel like you learned about it, and it's not just a political thing. I think it goes into our next question, which is, why do you think that a lot of rabbanim don't wear it? A lot of rabbis have, I won't say they've spoken against it, but they have said that they don't believe that it's something people should do.
Okay, well that's a very, very good question, and it's also a bit of a loaded question. There isn't one single answer,
right.
But in general, I'd say that we are conservative towards any visually drastic change.
Right.
Right. It's one thing if we do something in private, something in secret, that's besina, that we're not like absolutely sticking out, because there's more of a social aspect than anything else. But we're more conservative towards anything that's visually drastic, and having color strings definitely will be noticeable. That being said, one common reason given is lack of mesorah. Without getting into it, there are a number of things that we do today that are different from our parents upon new information. Some of which I can think of off the bat include turkey, which was not noticed until the Americas were discovered, right? The bottom in tefillin, right? 3-4 generations ago, the majority of tefillin, if you were lucky, were made with dakos leather, which were made with super thin leather that could easily bend and warp after about a year or so.
Yeah, I've seen old tefillin, I've seen how they just look always warped. Like, especially when I've seen, from the Shoah, you see some of the old tefillin, they're warped, and it's not just from age.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that till really recently too.
I've seen it also, and you see it in those drawstring bags. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So those were the tefillin that existed back then. Tefillin bottom from gasos is a relatively recent innovation, and Baruch Hashem, because we have the technology today, which we didn't have mesorah for, we're able to enhance our shmiras mitzvahs and not have to replace our tefillin bottom, every couple of years. Okay. Another one is the tefillin straps being made completely black. I still have tefillin paint and tefillin markers from the time when I personally have switched my straps a couple of times since for a different reason, because if you wear your tefillin every day, the piece of leather that goes around your forearm, it eventually gets super thin, and there actually starts to become a halachic issue as to what is too thin, right? So I've actually changed my tefillin straps a couple of times, and now I'm wearing all black. But I remember a time when my tefillin straps were not all black, and I would need to take a marker to mark it, because one of the sides has to be completely black. Right. That's one. Another one is cloth of Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah, a couple generation or two ago, weighed approximately to 20 to 30 pounds, and you have to be a really strong guy to do Hagba. There's still the psychological aspect for a lot of people in doing Hagba, that you have to bench press like 200 pounds. But today you could have a Sefer Torah that weighs under 10 pounds.
Right.
So the cloth the quality of the cloth has been changed because of new technology. And
it's much thinner. But they do they last as long?
Yeah. Yeah. And take a look at mezuzahs, for example. And mezuzahs, you have I would say the equivalent of thinness of cloth. And when you check your mezuzahs every twice every 7 years, if your mezuzahs are not like outdoors, generally speaking, they will come back kosher. So the quality of the cloth is not going to ruin anything. If anything, it's going to enhance it. But the mesorah for making that type of cloth has not been around for 3,500 years, right? And this is one of my personal favorites. Saying Shehem Shachvim Aleinu. I can tell you that when I was 14 years old, I was told about this edition. Up until then, I didn't say Shehem Shachvim because where was the mesorah? But it came out that a lot of Gedolim were saying you should add it because it was taken out. Due to religious persecution, right? Because there was a Mshumad who came out and said, you know the word varik, Shehem Shachvim Lehevel varik. Varik is the gematria of Yeshu, so therefore we got to take the whole thing out. Even though generally we try not to even add add a word where it's not in place. This especially applies with Nusach Hashmaz. Nusach Sfard is pretty much anything goes, but Nusach Hashmaz, they're very, very, very medactic in terms of adding even a word.
Right. Yeah, I go to a Nusach Sfard shul, and it's always it's interesting when I bring guests. They're always looking at me kind of strange.
Exactly. So anyway,
why are you doing this? Why are you davening this way? But yeah, so obviously if you have different Nusach Sfardis, Ashkenaz, and the different cloth, it seems to me that there should be at least people should be at least learning about this. And that's what I think part of what you're doing is you're not telling people what to do. I've noticed that you don't tell people that they should do this mitzvah. You said it's a mitzvah you do.
I just present the information and let people make their own decisions. I love people no matter what they do. Everybody has their own means of arriving to their own conclusions, and I think it's a beautiful thing.
You had mentioned about the Mashiach, that the Aruch HaShulchan says that until the Mashiach comes, that we will not be wearing Techeiles. Has that been, a lot of people tell you that, you mentioned?
Yes. So I was actually going to get into that. That's actually the next reason I wanted to bring out. Another reason why a lot of Gedolim will not wear it, a lot of people will not wear it, is because there were commentaries that were very explicit that Techeiles won't come until Mashiach, such as the Aruch HaShulchan. Now, this may not sit well with certain people, but the reality is we have to accept that not only aren't our Gedolim infallible, but with many differences in opinion, we cannot try to please everyone. We need to accept that some will be held by and some won't. Right. During the Aruch HaShulchan's time, while on this topic, and this may shock some listeners, And then Mashiach, well, on this topic, mainstream Gedolim actually objected to a state of Israel being created besides Satmar.
Right.
And the Mashiach would need to come first. The reality today is that there is a state of Israel, right, for better or worse, and the dirty little secret is that a lot of past hypothetical opinions on a Jewish state have since been suppressed, and unfortunately, a lot of them have been dug up by
the yeshivot, and I think someone posted on Facebook the other day that they honestly believe that the center of Torah, all the Das Torah, is now in Israel. And I wonder if that makes a difference. Obviously, you have all the yeshivot, you have all that. I wonder if just having more Haredi Jews move there and learn is part of the reason that people like myself are willing to even address this or even talk about it.
Right. So there's the hypothesis and there's the fact. At the time, let's be honest about it, there weren't a whole lot of Jews living in Eretz Yisroel. There was always a Jewish presence, but I hate to bring down a term from Reformed Jews, but Reformed Jews weren't too keen on the state of Israel because for them Berlin was the capital. Unfortunately, we see what happened a few decades later with the Shoah. That pretty much everything that you thought about Jewish life in Europe pretty much got destroyed. But that's a whole other tangent. But the reality today is that there is a state of Israel. There is a state of Israel. The secret is that a lot of past hypothetical opinions on a Jewish state have since been suppressed. Since at this time it's a moot point given that a modern state is fact. With the state comes new challenges. Both in terms of being a model nation and as being able to observe more mitzvahs in a proper manner. Okay, a lot of these restored mitzvahs have to do with the land itself, such as Trumas Maestros, Shemitah, and a lot more which were not able to be observed when many people were living in Eastern Europe. A lot of these restored mitzvahs have to. So the point I'm trying to get at is that when a new reality presents itself, with the potential for the fulfillment of more mitzvahs, this is something I think we should all strive to do within reason.
Right.
So that's another. What?
Moving on, the one thing we should address is you personally hold that it's murex, the snail, that is where phyllis comes from. Why did you just go back to the archaeology and maybe some of the science here? Why did you believe that it's the murex?
Well, it's not so much. So look, I mean, it's science and technology and Rabbanis. They're two completely separate things here. I personally did not say it's the murex or bust. I was going based on Gedolei Yisrael. This was what was accepted by the majority of the Gedolei Yisrael that were accepting Techeiles, and so it's that simple. That's basically what I was going on. Right. My issue had less to do with the science aspect and more so like what were the Gedolim holding by. That was for me personally.
So what do you think, like, with the archaeology and science and also the mesorah, what do you think would make people like myself who used to doubt it? And I can obviously address what convinced me that there was a possible mesorah here. And obviously Rabbi Belsky said there was a mesorah. And I feel that means a lot to a lot of people that you have Gedolim that accepted this. But what do you think that other people would make them at least learn a little bit more about this?
Right. So there's a couple of aspects here. One is towards the entire attitude towards science and archaeology. There's a lot in the Haredi world. There's generally a lot of skepticism, and to a certain degree, I actually agree with that. Science, by definition, is based on uncertainty, testing, data points. Nothing is ever 100%.
Yeah, not everything about Halacha is about science. There's more than a few instances where we know science is
right.
the
And this
opposite of the Halacha, but we keep the Halacha because we don't keep it because it's science. We keep it because it's and that's something more.
Right. So religion is so science is based on uncertainty, and religion is based on certainty. hence the funny balance. Not only that, but when there's little transparency, there's also a lot more room for dishonesty to happen from the scientific aspect, which was the case regarding the chemist making razin or Techeiles by using, and I'm going to emphasize this, by using colorless liquids to affect the chemical reaction for Prussian blue. Okay, so it's that explains why an otherwise intelligent gadol would be fooled by a chemist. Okay, so this is where you have a bit of skepticism, like, is it halachic, is it scientific, what have you. Halacha, but at the same time, halacha at different junctures, namely medical halacha, was dictated by the science of the era. So when science and medicine changes, halacha in this realm needs to adapt as well. One recent example is the communal frum attitude towards smoking. 3 to 4 generations ago, it was accepted since actual health benefits were recognized in terms of calming people down from stress, etc. As a famous commercial ad went, more doctors smoke Camels than ever any other cigarette. Have you heard of that? So smoking was a classic example, and not only was it accepted among everybody, as a famous commercial ad went, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette, right? Implying that all doctors smoked, yet the majority preferred one brand. Sports icons, movie stars, everyone advertised their tobacco of choice. And this definitely seeped its way into halacha. It was a different world medically than today. Smoking is generally considered usher today, whereas generations ago it wasn't. Very recently, Moshe Feinstein wrote that there's to the effect that there's nothing really wrong about smoking, whereas a gadol like Ravon Kotler, right, who was a contemporary in Rav Moshe's generation, when he was given the information that smoking was really bad for you, he actually ushered it, among many others. So it was actually a very, very interesting thing based on medical science. Archaeology is even less certain because a lot of what's involved is based on assumption. All that said, though, I believe that if the collective data gathered from rabbinic sources, science, archaeology, and history, point to a specific creature and the dying method, that will be enough for a posek, right, to effectuate a psak in which some poskim have already done regarding Techeiles. So these are 3 reasons, namely, that I could think of. In general, I find that there's a psychological hesitancy to stick out when something that hasn't been accepted by the world yet, and this is perfectly normal. That said, speaking about the Gedolim, a number of poskim do wear and have also worn, and when they were alive, wore New York's Techeiles. Namely, Rabbi Yisrael Belsky is the Tzitzel, Rabbi Herschel Schachter, Rabbi Vincent Halberstam, Rabbi Mordechai Mordechai Karpshit, and Rabbi Karp, by the way, is the Talmud of Rabbi Eliashiv. Rabbi Shlomo Gissinger, Tzitzel, Rabbi Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, who is a son-in-law of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Tzitzel. Shlomo Machpud, Rabbi Shabtai Rappaport, Rabbi Moshe David Tendler, who recently passed away, Rabbi Meir Mazuz, and many others.
For those that would like to learn more about this, where would you recommend they go? Besides your Facebook group, which we'll link to.
Okay, fine. So in terms of where to go, there are a number. Techeiles is the organization that started this process. So I would reference their library, which is over 800 pieces on techeiles.com. As well as their YouTube channel. There's also a Chabura based in Lakewood with a website called techeiles.org with lots of rabbinic sources. I also created a website called bluefringes.com, which features a comprehensive list of tying methods, Gedolim wearing Techeiles, archaeological and rabbinic sources as well. We didn't touch on this aspect, but from a scientific standpoint, there's Dr. Yisrael Zeiderman's website called Techeiles.info, Tekhelet.info, which contains his pieces related to his findings, as well as interesting email correspondences. And as you mentioned before, I mean, if someone should be so unfortunate as to be using Facebook, I created and presently run a Techeiles group, Techeiles, which has lively dialogue and activity. In terms of textual resources in English, there's Sefer Levushar by Meir Hellman. There's Threads of Reason by Rabbi Moise Navon. There's Living Halacha 2, The Laws of Tzitzis by Rabbi Gershon Meltzer, who himself is a Techeiles wearer. And that book has a 50 to 60 page chapter at the back just on Techeiles. In terms of for Hebrew text, there's Klil Tchil by Rabbi Eliyahu Tavger, who was the first person to wear Techeiles, the New York Techeiles in close to 2,000 years, give or take. The above can all be purchased from Amazon or from your local farm store. There's also Misha Yakir from Patel Techeiles website, which has a collection of articles on Techeiles and gets published year after year. I'll also add that there's an important comprehensive sefer called Techeiles by Rabbi Menachem Burstein who runs an organization called Poor Fertility. Okay, he wrote this in 1988, which was actually some years before Techeiles even came to existence, let alone sold strings for this mitzvah. And this can be obtained only by contacting them directly for a sefer at office@poorfertility.org. The above said, I mean, this is still a fairly new, exciting mitzvah, and as much has been said and written on this matter, there continues to yet be new developments in this important area.
Hi, this is Rabbi Pesach Lattin with the Jewish Link. Please click down below and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.